Coming up next, one of the greatest producers of the 70s and 80s gives us the lowdown, working with one of the greatest bands of the rock era. He did most of their biggest albums. He got recruited to help this band when their sound was softer, more acoustic, and they wanted to rock, so he helped take them to the next level, where they not only became legends, but one of the biggest bands ever. And this interview is a treat. He tells the stories behind helping craft some of their biggest hits, including a classic that the band wrote after seeing a beautiful young woman, a hottie, with an old fat rich guy, and the great one-liner that came from that became the song. Plus, the song that the band regrets putting on their album because it was written with an outgoing member of the group and his girlfriend, who happened to be a U.S. president's daughter. See if you can guess who it is. Plus, the classic that was sung by the backup singer, and after that, he had immense pressure to hit a certain high note every night after it became a huge hit. And then one revelation you'll never believe. The biggest selling album ever took an afternoon to put together. It's all next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember the misadventures of Underdog, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below by clicking on the white button, the red button. I promise you're going to find something to dig on this channel. Also, make sure to check out our podcast at Spotify, at Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to rate us and leave us a comment. We got some new stuff going up there. It's time for another edition, another episode of our series, Revelations, where featured artists go deep on their greatest songs and their greatest albums, insight into the biggest hits of all time you will not find anywhere else. And we have a true legend today, Eagles producer Bill Szymczyk, who helped transform their soft rock country sound to straight ahead rock, taking them from Take It Easy and Peaceful Easy Feeling, that sound, the early 70s, to the already gone Hotel California sound of the mid to late 70s. Today, he gives us the behind the scenes blow by blow of On the Border and One of These Nights, two albums that gave us multiple Eagles classics, including the title track, One of These Nights. It was so high, Don Henley worried about being able to hit those notes every single night. And then there's Lyin Eyes, and a great one-liner that came from Glenn Frey seeing basically a supermodel with an old fat rich guy, and he wrote the line down on a napkin. It became a smash. Ain't no way to hide your lying eye. Plus the song that Don Henley wished would not have been put on any Eagles album, written by Out the Door member Bernie Leadon and a U.S. president's daughter. Plus the pressure of Take It to the Limit, where the normally tried and true backup singer Randy Meisner was front and center with one of the greatest high notes ever recorded, and the pressure that came with trying to nail it every single night. And last of all, Bill explains how the biggest selling album ever was a spot decision that took an afternoon to do, and it sold 40 million copies. I'm telling you, it's a scorcher coming up next on Professor of Rock. Here it is. Tell me about when On the Border started and then bringing you in those first few days with Eagles.
Well, Joe Walsh, he was buddies with him. They were looking for a producer, and Joe suggested me. And he talked to me about it, and I said, and I thought of them at that point, yeah, they're just, basically a country rock band, and emphasis on country. And I said, I don't want to be a country rock. I don't want to produce country records. I'm going to make rock and roll records. And he said, Joe said, yeah, they do too, So I said, okay, set up a meeting. So we set up a meeting, and they interviewed me, and I interviewed them. And they asked me, how many mics on the drums, and how long would I get to work on my solo? And I gave them all the right answers. And they said, okay, well, let's get in the studio and find out. A couple of days later, we go into record plant in L.A., and the first track we did was Already Gone.
Yeah, Jack Tempchin, I had a chance to talk to him, and he told me about that song, and he wrote it as a country song.
Well, we toughened it up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would say that's the Eagles rocking the song.
And also on that album, there was they had done a version of On the Border, the song On the Border, with Glenn Johns, and I totally changed it up and rocked it out more. actually did a little like R&B tribute to the Temptations when it was like, you know, when the second chorus comes around. It was fun. We had a good time. Good Day in Hell. That rocked out.
It's been a good day in hell. Tomorrow I'll be
Even like James Dean, great album tracks.
James Dean. So hungry and so
Of course, Best of My Love, you know, their first #1 hit as a band. It still had a little bit of kickback to that older sound, but
Well, that was a Glenn Johns production.
give you the best of my love.
That and You Never Cry Like a Lover. Those are the two that they kept.
You never cry like a lover.
And from that point on, it was me.
yeah, and it opened up that chapter. And what I love is how their sound developed. And I've read a lot about you as in production wise, that a lot of times people bring you in to develop that sound, to evolutionize the evolution of a sound. And you can see that evolution of the Eagles from On the Border to One of These Nights.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, a lot of credit should go also to Don Felder, because he joined at the very end of On the Border, and he played like on two things, but then he went on tour with them for that, to support that record. And when we went back in for One of These Nights, he was well into the band, and even as far as writing with them and so on and so forth. But his guitar style and everybody's, except for Bernie, wanting to rock out more. That's how come One of These Nights to me was a huge step up.
One of these nights. One of these.
Let's talk about the title track of One of These Nights. Of course, the album was massive, sold 4 million copies, to #1 record. That's their first #1 album, and won a Grammy. You could just see the progression of the Eagles in that rock sound there. And of course, Don Henley. And tell me about One of These Nights.
Yeah, we were ensconced in Studio B at the record plant in LA, and we just worked, constantly. This is the one when I think they had maybe 3 songs written when we first went in, and it got progressively worse as time went on. This is when we really started writing and recording in the studio, doing tracks without vocals. And then the lyrics will come later. And it was just make another record.
One of these dreams.
Well, now that Glenn and Don were writing a lot together, sharing a house in Beverly Hills at that time, and Lyin Eyes.
Ain't no way to hide your lying eye.
One of These Nights.
The moon is calling, the fever is high, and the wicked
And of course, Take It to the Limit, starting with Randy.
alone at the end of the evening.
But them coming in, finishing it after the thrill is gone.
After the thrill is gone.
I remember reading somewhere in an interview that Don Henley gave, I think it was with Cameron Crowe, where he said that it was their satanic country rock period. Because it was a dark time in both politically and musically in America. A lot of things changing and a lot of things happened. Of course, that definitely inspired a lot of the writing. But remember that Glenn Frey said that One of These Nights is about kind of, lyrically about us saying, one of these nights I'm going to do this. I'm going to go, sweep that waitress off her feet. One of these nights I'm going to, and we never quite get there. We
Yeah.
the lies that we tell ourselves. And what do you remember about producing that song and what stood out to you?
Well, one thing I did as a professional listener was I kind of put the tom fill and the constant tom fill would hit with the snare.
Someone to be kind to in between the
And I picked that up from Willie Mitchell and his producing Al Green and people like that. And I suggested that to Henley when we were doing the basic track, and he dug it, and he got right into it. So he was an R&B freak too. So he knew where I was coming from on that. And then the guitars, I mean, stacking the guitars is like, this is rock and roll now. Now we're really rocking.
Oh yeah, and the harmonies on that. I mean, absolutely, you can definitely feel the R&B and soul influence.
Right. That's kind of where I wanted everything to kind of go. I always wanted it, and not only with the Eagles, but with a lot of artists, is have that soulful bottom and R&B hints around the edges, if you will, even if it was a folk record.
Absolutely, because it brings the soul forward. And I mean, Don Henley, I remember reading an interview where he said that, boy, that was a high song for me to sing. So every night I was
yes.
some nights I'll hit the notes and some nights I won't.
That's right. That was up there. That was way up there.
That's one of those songs that just sounds like heaven when you hear it through the radio. A perfect radio hit,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Lyin Eyes. I got to ask you about that, because that was kind of one of those songs that had one foot in the legacy of the past Eagles with that country.
Oh yeah.
A foot in the
Oh
future.
yeah.
That's what I love.
You can't. I mean, I knew that you can't just blow all that good stuff away. I mean, that was like major hits that were in that vein, acoustic vein. And so every album that we did, there was at least one or two of those.
There ain't no way to hide your lying eye.
I know that was a song that I read. The lyrics to it came quite a bit earlier. They just never finished it. It's when they were in Dan Tana's together.
They had that line, "You can't hide those lion eyes."
You can't hide your lying eye.
And I remember that when Glenn came back from Dan Tana's, and he had that, and he told us the story about this old guy and this young chick and yada yada and yada yada, and he goes, there's going to be a song there. And, that was literally the birth of it from that dinner. Within, I'd say, 3 weeks, they had pretty much written it.
And your smile is a pin disguise.
Just went on and on forever. It's like 6 minutes long. Yeah. There's a lot of chapters to that story, buddy.
There absolutely is. Yeah. I just saw him at the Sphere about a month ago. And
Wasn't that incredible?
Oh, one of the best concert experiences I've
No, you and me both.
Eagles were perfect.
Right. Henley had the great line when we saw him, and I think he used it quite a bit, is that, well, we're just the house band, and this is the show.
Yeah. Then he said, but, I think we can hold our own.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But, the thing about Eagles, though, a little off topic for a second, but there's only a few bands that are like this, where they can take you through the course of your entire life, and it doesn't matter what generation you are, because I'm a Gen Xer.
Uh-huh.
Those songs, and it takes you through the entire progression of your life. They've had so many hits and so many iconic songs that have been moments of our checkpoints of our personal history.
Right. Yeah.
You feel like your life is flashing before you. And baby boomers, my dad raised me on, that was his favorite, one of his top 3 favorite bands of all time. But when they're called the American Beatles, that's not hyperbole. It's just true.
No, that's not far off.
So many dozens of songs that everybody knows.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that Sphere experience is just monumental because of
it. It is. That's stunning.
But I love what they did with Lyin Eyes, how they told the story there at the Sphere. Yeah, Glenn Frey saw a beautiful woman and kind of a heavy-set guy following her, and he said, "Man, she can't hide it."
No, absolutely not.
J.D. Souther said that they would get great ideas from just people watching.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. What stands out to you about Lyin Eyes as you produced it, is listening to it and giving feedback as they were, preparing that track and arranging it and recording
It
it?
was that was a really easy track to do. I mean, it was I think three acoustics and drums and bass and just charge through it and then the hardest part was actually doing the vocals.
Ain't no way to hide your lying eye.
Not because the writing wasn't done. The writing was done, but there was like 2 bushels of vocals, 2 bushels of words. It was a long song.
And it breaks her heart to think her love is only.
I just remember the track went easily, and the vocals were a little bit tougher.
I remember reading somewhere where Dom Felder said that he was so impressed with the way that Glenn Frey was so focused on the first word in the song "City," getting it perfectly. Sometimes he'd come in a little too early or a little too late. The T was a little bit sharp, but he said every time that he hears it now, he just appreciates the craft that Glenn Frey wanted to be perfect.
I'll tell you a story about that. City girls just seem to find out early. That line comes from 6 different takes on 4 different days.
City girls just seem to find out early.
I had this board, and we were doing the vocal for that in Criteria in Miami. And this one-of-a-kind board had where your channel selectors were these incredibly fast relays, touch relays. And I could line up, what I would do 4 or 5 vocal takes on 4 tracks. Then I'd line them up, all equal level and everything. You'd listen to one, listen to the next, listen to the next, and you're looking for the best of the lot.
Rich old man, and she won't have to worry.
I could hit in between vowels, just between 2 tracks, and it was you couldn't hear it. It just was like that. It was so quick. So city girls just seem to find out early. Si is one, T is another, girls is one, and I think just seem might have been together. But that's when we really started to pick nits. We were in high nitpick mode.
Comfort an old friend who's feeling down.
Well, Glenn Frey said that one of these nights was the most fluid and painless album that he ever made.
I never heard that quote, but I would agree.
He said that was the most fluid and painless were the exact words.
The only bummer about that, well, and it wasn't really a bummer in the long run, to coin a phrase, was Bernie was not on board with the Rockers. That writing was on the wall. I think it was when we were listening. One day we were listening back to. You've probably heard this story. We were listening back to takes from the night before, and it's everybody just gets there around 2:00 in the afternoon, and listen to what we did last night. And I played like 4 takes of the same song, 4 different takes. And so, what do you think of that? I like 3. I like 1, whatever. And Bernie was sitting down in the front of the console, so I couldn't see him. And I asked Bernie, I said, well, Bernie, which take did you like? What do you think? And I see 2 arms come up over the console, and he goes, I think I'm going surfing. Got up and left. That's when we knew, not long for this.
Well, and also Don Henley said a little bit about Wish You Peace, that looking back on it, that's one song he regrets going on the album. He felt like that did not fit the Eagles.
Wish you peace when the cold.
I agree. But as the producer, I had to back Bernie on that. And one of the reasons I didn't like it was because it was, quote, written by Bernie and Patty Davis. He didn't like that, and then every time that she would show up at the studio, everybody else would just leave. It was like, oh, don't bring her around anymore. She was not particularly welcomed.
Yeah, well, and Don Henley said that. He said, look, I supported it too because we're trying to keep the peace.
I wish you comfort in the.
Right.
just the dynamics of a band and the creativity and the different ways that people want to go. And
Oh
it
yeah.
seemed like most Eagles were on the same page of wanting to go that style, and Bernie was still going the other styles.
Fever's end, wish you
Here's another one: is Journey of the Sorcerer. That's Bernie's other song, on the album. And Hanley didn't want. He said, "We don't do instrumentals." And I said, "Well, we're going to do this one," and because it was a cool lick, a banjo lick. And Felder and I got into it with some backwards stuff and some, just spooky, weirdo stuff. And I enjoyed the hell out of that. I think that's a really great track. What was it? Somebody in England wound up, it was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They used that as their theme for like 20 years.
That's right. You just never know where it's going to go.
You never know. When we first did it, before there was a name for it, I called it Fellini in Florida.
I love it. Dynamics of the different types of songs and the way that they approach it. Take It to the Limit was also, what an incredible song.
take it to the limit one more time.
And Randy's, Time to Shine with that incredible ending, the showstopper.
One more time.
He had pretty much most of that written before we started the record. That was one of the maybe four that were well underway. I will never forget, we're at Criteria for this one. And we usually would go out to dinner and then come back, and then we'd demo what we were going to do the next day. And I remember coming back from dinner and we were demoing Take It to the Limit. And when we got to the fade, I said, I want this to be like those giant classic R&B records. I want you to take it down, break it down, and then build it back up, and then take it back down, and then build it back up, and it was, and that's kind of gave it the whole, just to me, the big finish. Yeah, that's based on Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes.
Love it. That's great. That became the showstopper,
Yeah.
And what I love about Eagles as well is that, Glenn and Don, I mean, here you have the Lennon and McCartney of America, really. They were so willing to let the band members come in, other band members come in and have their moment to shine. And Glenn Frey knew that was a money moment. That was an important moment for the fans to hear every night. That would be a lot of pressure. Am I going to be able to hit that note,
As time went on, I had to feel for the guy. Sorry, dude. But Glenn he was like, you sang it, you're going to sing it again. It was tough. It really played on Randy's head.
So going into Greatest Hits 71 to 75, biggest album of all time. This is
That shocked the hell out of me. I went, really?
Yeah, I remember as a little kid telling my dad, it doesn't even have Hotel California on it.
That was put together to just hold off the record company because we were taking so long with Hotel California. Well, just throw the hits thing together. I did that in an afternoon, for God's sake, and to do something. I mean, most of it, I think Glyn Johns had more cuts on it than I did. I think it was like 5-4 or something like that. But nonetheless, it was like a half hour in Bayshore, my studio, lop things together and ship it off. Okay, now get off our backs. And boom, the biggest selling record ever in America. That blows my mind.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Isn't Bill great? So many great stories. He's got more. We're going to share the story behind Hotel California, the album, and the long run coming up. Leave us a comment about these Eagles songs, about these your memories. If you haven't seen them at the Sphere, I think they're going to be doing some more dates. You got to check that out. Let's have a great discussion and celebrate some of the great songs. Make sure to check out our podcast. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.